On the 16th of July, 2026, the rivers of the Texas Hill Country burst their banks and flooded again. And they flooded the exact same region where, 1 year earlier, a wall of water had killed more than 130 people, 27 of them children and counselors at a summer camp. This time, the water came for the same towns, the same low roads, the same riverbanks. But this time, something was different. This is the story of the 2026 Texas floods, the catastrophe from the year before that still haunts this land, and the one change that may have decided who lived and who died. Start with what happened this July. Repeated thunderstorms stalled over the Texas Hill Country in south central Texas and simply would not move, dumping rain in quantities the ground could not begin to absorb. The National Weather Service measured between 10 and 20 inches of rain falling across parts of the Hill Country in just 2 days. In isolated spots in northern Uvalde County, the totals over 3 days approached 28 inches, well over 2 feet of water from the sky. Creeks became rivers, rivers became torrents, and once again, the water rose in the dark. There is a reason this exact region floods like almost nowhere else in America. Among meteorologists, the Texas Hill Country has a nickname, Flash Flood Alley. Its terrain is a trap. The soil is thin, and the bedrock beneath it is hard limestone, so when heavy rain falls, very little of it soaks into the ground. Instead, it sheets off the surface and pours down steep, narrow canyons that funnel all of that water into the rivers at once. A storm that would be a mere nuisance somewhere, flatter, can here turn a calm and shallow river into a killer in under an hour. It is one of the most dangerous places for flash flooding in the entire United States, and everyone who lives along these rivers knows it in their bones. 2 people were killed, a 74-year-old man in Uvalde and a man of around 65 in Center Point. Every death in a flood is a life and a family, and these 2 are no exception. But hold that number, 2, because it is the entire reason this story matters, and it only makes sense against what came before, because the emergency response this time was enormous. More than 2,300 responders were deployed across the flood zone, along with 1,400 vehicles. And they were busy. Over the course of the emergency, more than 230 people were pulled from the rising water in a wave of rescues across the Hill Country. 230 rescues is not a comforting number. It is a terrifying one. It means 230 separate times someone was close enough to drowning that a stranger in a boat or a helicopter had to reach in and pull them out. In a flash flood, the line between a rescue and a fatality is often only a matter of minutes. Flash flood warnings went up across the region, including Edwards County and Kerr County. The state threw everything it had at the water. Texas Governor Greg Abbott mobilized a full emergency response, and swift water rescue teams fanned out across the flooded counties, pulling drivers from stranded cars and residents from homes with the water already climbing to the windowsills. It was exactly the kind of operation that, 1 year earlier, had come too late for far too many. And that county name, Kerr, is where this story turns, because Kerr County is where, 1 year earlier, the unthinkable happened. To understand the fear in Texas this July, go back to the 4th of July, 2025. On that holiday weekend, along the Guadalupe River in Kerr County, the water did something almost impossible to imagine. The Guadalupe River rose about 26 feet in roughly 45 minutes. 26 feet, the height of a 2-story building, in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. There was no gradual creep, no slow warning as the water inched up. There was a wall of water in the middle of a holiday weekend, tearing through homes, RV parks, campsites, and summer camps while families slept. More than 130 people were killed in that 2025 flood. Kerr County alone accounted for 119 of them. And at the heart of the tragedy was a place called Camp Mystic, a historic, century-old all-girls Christian summer camp near the town of Hunt, right on the banks of the Guadalupe. When the water came, it came for the cabins full of children. 27 people connected to Camp Mystic died, 25 young campers and 2 counselors. It became one of the deadliest single moments in the entire disaster, and an image the nation could not shake. A summer camp in the dark, under a river that had risen 26 feet while the girls inside were sleeping. For the country, it was the detail that turned an already unimaginable disaster into something unbearably personal. These were not statistics. They were children at summer camp, in a place their families had trusted for generations. The loss of them is the reason the name Kerr County now carries a weight it never did before. And here's the part that turned grief into anger. The Camp Mystic deaths were not simply an act of nature that no one could have stopped. Investigators later concluded they were preventable. The National Weather Service had done its job. At 14 minutes past 1 in the morning, the NWS issued a flash flood warning for the area. The warning went out. But according to the final investigation, the camp's leadership then failed to evacuate the cabins for more than 90 minutes after that warning was issued. 90 minutes on a river that could rise 26 feet in 45. The report found that camp did not have the state-required written emergency plan. and lacked the evacuation measures that could have saved lives. The investigators' language was damning, a chain of cascading failures. The warning existed. The plan to act on it did not. The fallout from those findings was enormous. Through the following spring, wrenching testimony filled Texas courtrooms as the families of the lost demanded answers. At one point, a judge ordered that the Camp Mystic flood site itself be left untouched, preserved in effect as evidence of what had happened there. A century-old summer camp, a place that had meant nothing but joy for generations of Texas families, had become the center of an investigation into how 27 people, most of them young girls, could be allowed to die in cabins beside a river that everyone already knew could rise. There was one more failure that hung over the whole disaster, and it is the one that connects directly to 2026. In 2025, that stretch of the hill country had no flood sirens. No loud, unmistakable community-wide alarm to wake people in the middle of the night and tell them the river was coming. The lack of sirens was blamed, in part, for the sheer scale of the death toll. People were relying on phone alerts that many never saw in the dead of night, in an area with patchy signal. The water was faster than the warnings could reach them, so after 2025, that changed. In the aftermath of the Camp Mystic tragedy, the region installed what it had been missing: flood warning sirens. Physical alarms, built to blare across the valleys and wake everyone in earshot the moment the rivers turned dangerous. It was the single most obvious lesson of the disaster, written in 135 lives. And then those sirens sat there, waiting for the day they would be needed. The sirens were only part of a broader reckoning. Communities up and down the Guadalupe re-examined how a warning is supposed to reach people in the dead of night, in a place where a phone alert is worthless if there is no signal and no one awake to see the screen. A siren does not need a cell tower or a charged battery in a sleeping camper's cabin. It only needs to be loud. That brutal simplicity is exactly why its absence in 2025 was so catastrophic, and exactly why its presence in 2026 would come to matter so much. That day came in July of 2026. When the rivers rose again this July, the new sirens faced their first major test. And this time, the warnings were not silent. This time, alarms sounded across the hill country as the water climbed. This time, more than 2,000 responders were already moving, more than 230 people were pulled to safety, and the region that had lost 135 souls a year earlier lost 2. The sirens have been credited with helping to save lives in the 2026 flood, the exact thing their absence was blamed for the year before. That is the whole uncomfortable weight of this story. The rain in 2026 was not gentle. 10 to 20 inches, nearly 28 in places, on the same unforgiving terrain. The hill country is known as Flash Flood Alley, some of the most flood-prone land in the United States, where thin soil and steep limestone canyons turn rainfall into a wall of water with terrifying speed. The ingredients for another 100-death catastrophe were all there again. What was different was that this time the region heard it coming. But it would be a mistake to end on a note of comfort, because this same region has now been struck by catastrophic flooding 2 summers in a row. 2 Julys. 2 floods severe enough to kill. The hill country is not becoming less dangerous. If anything, the pattern of these sudden extreme downpours is a warning in itself. Scientists point to a simple, physical reason these storms are landing harder. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture, and when it finally lets that moisture go, it can dump it in shorter, more violent bursts. The geography of the hill country was always a flash flood trap. What is changing is how much water the sky can pour into that trap at one time. 2 catastrophic floods in 2 Julys is not, by itself, proof of a trend, but it is exactly the kind of back-to-back extreme that the science has been warning about for years. And for the people of Kerr County, that warning is no longer a line in a report. They have lived it twice. Sirens can wake people. Rescuers can pull them from the water. But neither one stops the rain from falling or the Guadalupe from rising, or the next holiday weekend from arriving under a sky heavy with the same kind of storm. For now, the immediate danger from this July's flood has passed. The 2,000 responders are standing down, and the 230 rescued are safe. And the families of Kerr County are left to mark, 1 year on, an anniversary written in water. Grateful that this July the number was 2, and unable to forget the July that it was 135. For more disaster reports built on the real numbers and the real sources, without the exaggeration, subscribe. And never miss the next one. Because in the Texas Hill Country, the rivers have flooded twice now in 2 summers. The sirens worked this time. The lesson of Camp Mystic was, at last, partly learned. But the rain will come back, as it always does, to Flash Flood Alley. And the only real question is whether the warnings will be loud enough and early enough the next time the water rises in the dark.